Well, this was a long time coming. It's pretty much PlayStation law. If you review 2 of the big 3 on PS2, you gotta review the 3rd one at some point. So today, let's take a look at Naughty Dog's, redheaded stepchild of a franchise. Okay, I joke, but real talk, it feels like Naughty Dog never really wants to talk about Jak and Daxter. If you watch any documentary on the company, they tend to skim over most of their time working on the series and quickly get to their 3rd major franchise, Uncharted. Then again, the Jak and Daxter series was kind of a transitional period for Naughty Dog. When they started the series, it was on their child-friendly platformers, and by the end it transitioned to more adult-focused storylines. While they might glance over it, Jak and Daxter was probably one of my favorite times for Naughty Dog as a company. You really got to see them experiment a lot more than they did in the past. But we'll get into that soon enough. As for Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy, well, how did this franchise even come to be? Well, back in the PlayStation 1 days, Naughty Dog were the ones in charge of the Crash Bandicoot franchise. But when it came time for the PlayStation 2, their contract with Universal expired, and they were no longer able to work on the franchise anymore. So it was time to develop a new IP. The big change they wanted for this series was the type of levels and world you would be exploring. See, the original Crash Bandicoot was being developed in a world pre-Mario 64, so there wasn't exactly a guide on how a platformer was supposed to be made in 3D. So Naughty Dog just shifted the camera and made Crash Bandicoot based on that. But when Mario 64 was shown, they basically went, oh. So when it came time to make Jak and Daxter in 1999, it was basically their chance to make their own Mario 64, but add their own twist onto it. They wanted to do what wasn't possible on a system like the N64 or PlayStation, and make a true open world, and thus, Jak and Daxter came to be in 2001 as a near-launch title for the PlayStation 2. Wait, that means this game turns 20 this year. Yeah! Yeah, that's totally why I'm reviewing it now. Yeah! We're going with that! Now, I remember picking up the first game a little after the Ratchet & Clank series on the PlayStation 2, and I remember enjoying my time pretty well, but it did take me a while to head over to Jak 2. For these reviews, I'll be looking at the HD collection on the PlayStation 3, which I know some of you might be confused. Why am I not covering the games on the PlayStation 4? Well, here's the thing. The PlayStation 3 versions are proper HD remasters of the game, while the PS4 versions are emulations of the PS2. As such, the game actually looks better on the previous hardware. They also cost less than the PS4 version, so if you have the choice, I would grab the HD trilogy on PlayStation 3. Also, the menu has these HD animations for Jak and Daxter for each individual game. I love these look fantastic. It also makes me feel bad inside because this is probably the closest we will ever get to a proper Jak and Daxter game in HD. And now you have to share that pain with me. But interesting story about the PS3 collection, because this has gone down reportedly as one of Sony's hardest HD ports to create. Mainly because the Jak and Daxter series did a lot of things that were either unconventional or you weren't supposed to actually do with the PS2 in order to make the game work. Such as using Goal, a programming language made by Andy Gavin, co-creator at Naughty Dog, and he was the only member of the team who actually knew how it worked, using all of the PS2, including processors from the PlayStation 1 emulation in the system that you weren't actually supposed to use. It made sense at the time, but they never thought when making these games that it would be handed off to someone else, and when Naughty Dog heard they were going back into the code, there was a bit of, oh my, I am so sorry. So, you know, credit to mass media for actually figuring this out, and besides a few odd things here and there, it's probably the best PlayStation 3 collection done for the platformers of this era. However, because a lot of you were bringing it up on my social media, don't play the Vita version of the collection. That praise I gave for the PlayStation 3 version doesn't apply here. While the original Jak and Daxter runs fine enough, Jak 2 and 3 are borderline unplayable with horrible frame rate, slow down aplenty. I wouldn't bother with these versions at all. But I think you guys have waited long enough. It's time to jump in to the Precursor Legacy. So our tale begins with Jak and his pal Daxter sneaking off one night to the forbidden Misty Island. While there, they see Gal and Mara, two dark eco sages gathering an army of creatures. Jak and Daxter explore the island and get into a scuffle that results in Daxter being knocked into a pool of dark eco, with him becoming an Ottsel. Think of it like an otter and a weasel mixed together that in another dimension apparently has a clothing line. The next morning, the two go to the green eco sage Samos, who informs them that the only ones that can help them are Gal and Mara, who kind of went dark eco crazy. So the two of them set off to find power cells to be able to progress in the world and eventually stop the two dark eco sages and save the day. So very typical platformer plot, but what helps are the characters you meet. There's a variety of people along the way that you have fun interactions with in a very Insomniac kind of way. Such as in the Spiral Ratchet series, they make the world feel more lived in and feel like an actual place instead of a set of levels. The only thing I kinda don't get is a bit of gameplay and story dissonance at the end, where light eco is needed to change Daxter back, but they had Jak use it instead in order to lay the final blow. There are multiple light ecos that spawn here. Daxter totally could have gotten it himself, that's all I'm saying. But in all, the plot here gets the job done, and this is the only time the plot summary is gonna be this short for the series, believe me. But let's move on to the presentation. Jak and Daxter was a showcase title for the PlayStation 2 when it first came out, and over the years, I think most of it holds up. The biggest plus would be the world itself. Areas keep varied and feel like actual places in this world, instead of just feeling like platforming challenges. The only parts that kinda feel like that are the precursor areas, but those make up for it for having some of the coolest aesthetics in the whole game. Totally got a lot of Atlantean vibes from this. And all basically with no load times, or at least they do a really good job in hiding them. I can think of only like 3 levels where you go on a lift and I could tell, oh yeah, this is a loading screen. Which, hey, impressive for the time, and it goes a long way to making this world feel more organic. The game also keeps an active day and night cycle that can help enhance the mood in certain areas, which is nice. Character models can look a bit dated, not gonna lie. I ironically think you noticed it the most with Jak and Daxter themselves. Like, I can see that polygon count. But it was super early PlayStation 2, so I'll let it slide a bit. Voice acting gets the job done enough. Nothing too amazing, but it accomplishes what it needs to. Though while Jak can't talk, his death cry can sound super compressed and honestly takes me out of it a bit. Same goes for the soundtrack, like I can only really remember Sandover Village and the final boss off the top of my head. But the game does set the mood well enough. Cutscenes can be a bit static as most characters just stay in one place, but there's at least enough characterization to make them enjoyable. But I do have a complaint with them. During certain cutscenes, there will be a single black frame as it transitions to another camera. And this gets kinda distracting. I thought this was something just with the PlayStation 3 version, but when I went to the PS4 version, it did the same thing there, so yeah, not a big fan of that. So as a whole, Jak and Daxter's presentation, I mean, it gets the job done, but not much else, honestly. But maybe the gameplay has a bit more to it? Jak and Daxter is a 3D collectathon, so you know the drill. Get your main collectible, in this case power cells, to go to the next tier of levels. Rinse and repeat until you make it to the end. The big thing Jak and Daxter has going for it, it's its open world-like structure. You can just walk on right to another level whenever you feel like, get objectives done there, and come back at any time. And certain objectives require you finishing up something in another level, like opening up an eco vent or rescuing a tiny creature that will affect another level. But besides power cells, there are also these scout flies. When you find 7 in each level, you get a power cell. But there's also the precursor orbs, these Easter egg looking things that there's about 100 plus in each level that you can use on NPCs or these statues for more power cells. Look, power cells are important, okay? But Jak has a few abilities at his disposal, such as a long jump, a punch, and a spin attack because Naughty Dog really likes their comfort zone. But Jak's main power-up is in the form of Eco, of which there are 5 types. Dark Eco, which comes in these yellow boxes, which, yeah, don't touch them, that's bad. Green Eco that refills your health, where you can take up to 4 hits until death, and 1 big orb or 50 tiny orbs will refill 1 hit. And don't worry if you die, you got infinite lives for your journey. Blue Eco, which speeds you up, attracts orbs to you, breaks boxes automatically, and activates panels. Yellow Eco that lets you shoot fireballs and break metal crates. And Red Eco powers up your base attacks. You can only hold on to 1 Eco at a time, Later on, you get some vehicles that you can drive around, mainly this zoomer, which can also work with your eco powers. And when going to a new tier of levels, you need to watch out and make sure it doesn't overheat. And that's about it for Jak and Daxter 1. So what did I enjoy? Jak and Daxter was the earliest of the 3 main mascots to make their debut, and most of it I would say holds up well. The best part is easily the open world design. It's honestly surprising not many more platformers did this sort of thing, so it's a trait that the original Jak and Daxter still has to make it feel unique. I love how it tries to add more rhyme and reason to why you do different tasks, or how you travel from one place to another. The world building, while sort of subtle in this title, does a lot to really making a cool environment to explore, especially the Precursor themed areas. I just love these, and going into them to make the eco vents activate so I could use eco in other areas was always cool to see. The game is also surprisingly relaxing for a platformer. There's not too many high action sequences, so it really does have a relax on the sofa and go on an adventure feel, which does make it very replayable. There's plenty of minigames to break up the pace. I think each area does enough to make it stand out. You know, I kind of expected to write more here, and I know it might seem like a negative, but honestly, Jak and Daxter 1 is mostly having one core idea and executing it really well, and that open world design is what makes the game hold up among many of its other platformers before and after. But that's not to say this entire adventure isn't without its faults. Jak and Daxter does have some issues that do bring the experience down for me, and one of the big ones is the control. Jak for the most part feels fine, he's nice and weighty, but the thing that kept messing me up when going back to this game is his long jump. See, when you perform it, he rolls up for a second and then launches forward, and this feels super clunky going back. You need to line yourself up, give yourself some space to roll, and then launch, which limits its uses and feels unreliable. And I am gonna give them flack for that because Crash Bandicoot, their previous series, was able to make the long jump work just fine. In fact, there's a few things in this game that feel kind of clunky. Jumping on small platforms can be a little hard with Jak's weight. When you use your goggles to fire yellow eco for this defense mission, the stick is so stiff I'm just tapping it in order to aim. And some missions are straight up not a good time. Like getting these rats into the burrowing hole for this mission. These feel like they have a mind of their own and sometimes will go right over the hole without going in, which makes it feel super inconsistent. This area also has a lot of these ring challenges that I'm not a fan of either. You pretty much have one shot on these rings, since they like to put them on ledges or jumps, and if you miss it, which is very easy to do, it's back to the start, which isn't a fun time. But you wanna know what's really not a fun time? Spider Cave. Easily my least favorite part of the game. The area is super confusing, there's a lot of backtracking if you miss a jump. This is an area where you can really feel Jak's impreciseness with his controls. And man, if you miss one orb in this place, that's a needle in a haystack situation. You're never finding it again. Now granted, the game actually does give you 470 more orbs than you need in order to get all the power cells, so it's not like you need to get every last one of them, but still, if you want 100%, it can be a bit painful. Especially because, well, like Mario 64, the game that they were emulating the spirit of, 100% isn't really worth it. You need 100 power cells in order to open a door that shows something behind it, and then you're right back to the title screen. Huh? And Jak 2 only kind of follows up after that, so it's not really worth it. Kind of adding to that, you can tell by the end they were stretching to make that 100 number work. I mean, you buy like 6 of them in the final hub of the game, and there's even a 101 power cell. This was added because of a glitch preventing you from getting one later in the game. Eco also feels like a concept that wasn't really taken advantage of. Blue Eco feels the most used throughout, so I don't have much of an issue with that one. Yellow Eco has some uses, but it's super limited to just shooting and nothing else. And Red? I honestly keep forgetting Red is even a thing. It's used in like 2 areas and that's it. And even then, its benefits aren't really noticeable. I was really expecting some point in the game to say use all the ecos together with you having to switch between all of them in order to solve puzzles, but nope, they're pretty separated throughout. Like the blue eco used in those timed puzzles, that's the most complex eco gets, which is a bit of a letdown. Speaking of another type of eco, I'm not a big fan of the green eco health mechanic. Like 4 hits is fine and recovering health from a big eco, that checks out. What I'm not a fan of is getting the 50 tiny orbs to get 1 health back. These things are not as common as you would think, and getting 50 of them takes a long time. By the time you fill one up, the average player is going to take a hit or 2 during that time. Honestly, if you really need the health, it's better to just dive off of a cliff and reset it. Not to mention in the very few boss fights, the environment will probably kill you more than the bosses. Yeah, the health system doesn't really feel that well thought out. Speaking of which, there's only like 3 bosses in the game. The plant one, I hardly call that a boss. The second one is even more of an environment fight, and the final one is... okay. Definitely think Ratchet and Sly had better bosses even in their first outings. And finally for me, Daxter, at least in this game, kind of gets on my nerves. Well, for one, despite being in the title of the game, Daxter never once is used for anything gameplay-wise. Kind of weird comparing it to other PS2 platformers at the time. And he's meant to be the comic relief and somewhat of a voice for Jak because he can't speak. But honestly, Daxter comes off more as irritating than charming. Like most cutscenes is him just not wanting to do something or shrugging off everyone he meets, so he doesn't really have anyone to comedically play off of. And considering one of the main parts of the journey is to help him, doesn't make a lot of motivation to help him out. He's all talk and no action, but with no big character movement for him, and I don't count the light eco bit considering what I pointed out before, and even then he's very passive aggressive about it. He's one of the things that I don't think aged that well about this title. Jak and Daxter really has one core idea and fleshes it out really well, but it definitely does have a lot of first in a series type of issues. It's still a fun time, but not exactly a must play, I would say. So overall, Jak and Daxter 1 is good. Well, okay, there's more to it than that. It's ambitious for the time, and for the most part, it works. This open world style of platformer, I can't say many others really ever go for this level of an interconnecting world. The closest I can think of is like Bowser's Fury, and that was in 2021 compared to 2001. Yeah. So Jak and Daxter still has merit there, and despite 100% not really getting you anything, doing so was relaxing and it didn't even take that long. If you're a platformer fan looking for something structurally sound but a little bit different than the norm, Jak and Daxter will do the job. That being said, this playthrough I saw a lot more cracks in the armor than I remembered, 100% not being really worth it, the control issues, and the game maybe playing it a bit too fundamentally safe. It's a good time, but nowadays might not leave as much of an impact as it once did. And that's it for Jak and Daxter 1. Overall, a good time, but it definitely feels like there should be a sequel that really fleshes out all the ideas to its fullest possible extent, you know? And then we got Jak 2. Oh boy. Well, with that looming doom ahead of me, thank you for watching the video. You can check out my other stuff, go support my Patreon, join the Discord, all of that good stuff. Anyway, the next one's gonna be a long one, so give me a little time for that one. This one's gonna be a time.